Hello and welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel and to our weekend live stream lecture that we do every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern. So we're going to be talking about a particular historical topic in some detail, giving you some background on it, some information that you voted for here exclusively on YouTube on the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, where we bring you history in all sorts of ways and shapes and forms in a friendly, neighborly manner, 24/7, 365 or 366 days a year during a leap year. And we welcome all of you to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel and to our live stream lecture. We had our Q&As yesterday and Saturday. Now we're going to be doing our live stream lecture. So please like and subscribe and become a Friendly Neighborhood Historian. I won't be interacting with the chat as much because I'll be doing the lecture. And we'll see if we have time for Q&A afterwards. But yes, let's see what actually won the poll. So I'm going to go out here and hold on one second. Okay, so I just checked the poll that we did, and we do a poll every week for you to decide what kind of live stream lecture you guys would like to hear from me. Sorry, Solomon, I hope you feel better. And yes, Trump, in a historical context, has won the poll, so I'll be doing a live stream lecture about the history of, well, Donald Trump. I'm not going to go into the political opinion side of this. I don't get my political opinions anyways here on the channel, but I will be discussing the historical context of how Donald Trump became the U.S. president, how he lost and came back and won again, and everything that means. And of course, I'll be talking a little bit about that, but I'm not going to be giving a particular political perspective on it. I'm not going to be saying whether it was a good or a bad thing or what necessarily happened, but given that it's contemporary history and history is an ongoing process that continues to this day, it is technically part of American history that Donald Trump was only the second U.S. president to be elected to 2 non-consecutive terms behind Grover Cleveland. So I will talk about that. I don't know how long that's going to take me. But, yep, so much to Harry's delight, the background for today will not be a historical background. It will be the President of the United States. So we're talking about President Trump in a historical context here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel for a Sunday live stream lecture. And if you like history and social studies, consider liking and subscribing. And I'll change the background. Don't worry, you don't have to stare at Trump's mug all the time. Look at me. Don't look at him if you don't want to look at him. I understand why you would not. Anyways, Donald Trump is one of the most controversial, over-the-top, loud, and bombastic and brutish U.S. presidents in American history. However, he is not the only U.S. president to be bombastic, brutish, and over the top. The idea that President Trump is some sort of anomaly that has never been seen before in American history and is a wannabe dictator because he's different than any other U.S. president comes with complete historical ignorance. People who believe this do not know anything about history. They do not want to know anything about U.S. presidential history. American presidents wielding tremendous amounts of power has been the case for over a century. American presidents being brutal, bombastic, and in your face has been part of American history. There have been multiple U.S. presidents, as many U.S. presidents as there have been who have been quiet, calm, and demure. There have been almost an equal amount of U.S. presidents who have been aggressive and assertive. Oh, I'm sorry, Horace. I'm sorry you're still on a timeout. But anyways, a lot of U.S. presidents have actually been not too different than Donald Trump and acted in ways that were similar to Donald Trump and gotten their way. Perhaps the two presidents that Trump is compared to most often, Andrew Jackson and Teddy Roosevelt, were both bombastic. Both could be very brutish. Both had their own charming appeal, their own group of loyal supporters who kind of got behind an entire movement. Trump isn't just a president. He has created a political movement that has changed the Republican Party, right-wing politics, and understandings of nationalism, not just in the United States, but throughout the entire world. I'm not saying, again, any of this is a good or a bad thing. I am talking about the things that they are. I'm not answering questions or interacting with the chat right now. I am busy talking about my live stream lecture about President Trump, the 45th and 47th U.S. president. I'm looking at it in a historical context because that's what we do here. Every dog gets its day. Everyone deserves their day in court, and Donald Trump has been to court, so he knows that for sure. So I am trying to be completely fair about that. Yes. Not even close. Don't even accuse Roosevelt of being Donald Trump. Okay, Harry, if you were listening, Theodore Roosevelt got bitter because he lost a primary, created a third party, divided the vote, and got Woodrow Wilson elected. And I know you think Woodrow Wilson is terrible. So Theodore Roosevelt is the reason but that's how petty Theodore Roosevelt could get. As much as I love Theodore Roosevelt, and he's a superior president to Trump in almost every single category, I would agree with that. Although we can't fully judge Trump because he's not even out of the office yet. But the truth of the matter is that President Trump does share a lot in common with presidents who are extraordinarily energetic movement leaders and use the presidency to get their way. And Theodore Roosevelt was certainly, if not the first major U.S. president to do that. So, anyways, so where was I? To be fair, if Roosevelt had gotten the nomination, he would have smashed Woodrow Wilson in the election. Yes. And if there hadn't been COVID, Trump would have won his second election. So, you're wrong, Harry. Sit this one out on Trump. I know you have a lot of bias. I don't. So, and yes, Trump is behind me because here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, we're doing our live stream lecture about President Trump in a historical context because that's what people voted for. I'm not going to share whether I'm pro-Trump. I don't talk about my political opinions or beliefs. If you want me to analyze a political topic in depth, I can do so for a super chat. But today I'm focusing only on the history around the 45th and 47th president because that's what the people here on this channel voted for. Yes, see, Harry, you're just believing narratives. You're just believing narratives. So Trump acts. Not everyone is exactly alike. Trump isn't exactly like Theodore Roosevelt or Woodrow Wilson or Franklin Roosevelt or any aggressive, assertive president. He's not even completely like Andrew Jackson, who's probably the closest comparison you can get. Somebody who was brutish, bombastic, and basically tried to bully and ignore whatever he thought was wrong and incorrect. So, anyways, let's see. So, getting back to it, Trump. Who is Donald Trump? First of all, let's look at him in his history a little bit, and then we'll look at Trump and how he rose to power in a historical context, and then what's going on and how he lost power. So we'll look at his presidency from a historical lens, but we're going to look at him first. Donald Trump is a New York business mogul, originally a real estate tycoon. His father, Fred Trump, built up a large real estate empire. Trump built upon this and expanded this empire, becoming one of the most successful men in the 1980s. He is kind of the quintessential 1980s New York businessman. He's extraordinarily wealthy. He's extraordinarily fashionable. He's handsome. He's telegenic. He becomes very popular. He's known for his being almost as much of a celebrity as he is a businessman. He has salacious affairs with all sorts of different women. He's been married 3 times. He's cheated on basically every single one of his wives. He has multiple children. So Trump's kind of a wild card, a wild child, a child of the 80s, a child of the economic boom and prosperity of that era, and definitely a huge real estate mogul. He becomes a multi-billionaire, and he's never shy about his opinions, about expressing his opinions. He's extraordinarily aggressive about his opinions, and he has a particular way of speaking his mind that is sensible to a lot of people, but also very arrogant, very selfish. Trump went through a lot of economic successes, but he also went through a lot of economic failures. He had several different bankruptcies, including the bankruptcy of a casino in Atlantic City, which is seen as one of his biggest problems. Yes, Lou, he didn't get $100 million from his father. He got $1 million that is equivalent to $6 million in today's money. Trump was a Democrat, yes, but more of a common sense, moderate type, always kind of sees the idea of a future in politics. I'm not answering questions really too much right now. So yes, Harry, that is incorrect. Please stop, Harry. So anyways, so Trump did get a lot of his money from his father. Trump did become successful in a lot of different ways. But he also had some business failures and problems. He went bankrupt 4 times. This isn't completely uncommon for ultra-rich people to do. Trump, basically, if you just look at his early part of his life, he's certainly just an ultra-rich businessman who is obsessed with making as much money as he possibly can. What else happens? So Trump becomes as much of a celebrity as he is a businessman, and this kind of transcends into the 1990s, and eventually he gets his own television show, The Apprentice, and then The Celebrity Apprentice, where basically he works with people to create businesses and see how well they can operate these businesses, learning from him based off of his very famous book that he probably didn't write, The Art of the Deal, in which he comes up with the idea of how to get business deals and get your way in business, and this influences the creation, this very egotistical, arrogant, brutish style of sharky kind of business tactics influences Trump's not only Trump's business model, but it influences his business empire and his celebrity status. Because if Trump is anything, he is egotistical, and this plays into a lot of his character and a lot of his popularity with the Apprentice and then the Celebrity Apprentice, where the famous words he would say to somebody who was kicked off a show is "You're fired," and that becomes his big line, what he's very well known for. So Trump goes from just being a businessman with some popular opinions and being kind of a big headliner in New York. Obviously, he's got Trump Tower in New York. He's considered the king of New York, to being more of a business, more of a celebrity, more on those front lines of celebrityhood. And obviously, this comes with all the gossip and the chronicles and the different marriages, the divorces, the children that he has with first Yvonne, I think Marla Maples, and then, of course, his third wife, a Slovenian model who's become the first lady named Melania. And Melania gives him his youngest son, Baron. He has two older sons and a daughter from his first wife, and a fourth daughter from his second daughter from his second wife. Trump also, of course, is known for fooling around quite a bit. He has an affair with many different people, including an adult entertainer named Stormy Daniels. When his third wife, is pregnant with his last son, this becomes extraordinarily controversial and will lead to Trump's 34 felony convictions in a story that I will explain later. So Trump has always kind of been a celebrity, always been very popular, and been very controversial. It's not that everybody loves him, it's that a lot of people love him and a lot of people can't stand him and find him egotistical. But one thing you cannot do about Donald Trump, no matter where you are, whether he's a businessman, a celebrity, or later a politician who runs for president, is that you can't really ignore him. He's pretty hard to ignore. And that's the thing. People have to form opinions about this man, and then they have to be right about their opinions about this man with the same sort of egotism and ridiculous brutishness that he has. So a lot of people who are opponents of Trump, whether they're on this channel, whether they're on any sort of social media platform, whether they're in the news media, first it was opposition to his behavior and character, which was obviously very rude and insulting at times and continues to be all the way to this day, or people who were politically opposed to him seem to react to Trump's egotism and narcissism with an egotism of their own, basically hating every single thing he does without any context for it. It's very hard to find somebody who actually has a very balanced opinion on this man. Enter me, Mvo, to give you our live stream lecture like we do every Sunday here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, talking about a particular historical topic, and I am talking about the 45th and 47th President of the United States in a historical context, without any spin, without any bias, acknowledging the faults while also acknowledging the successes. There is no doubt that Donald Trump was a very successful businessman. There is also no doubt that he failed multiple times. There is no doubt that Trump built up an impressive real estate empire. There is also no doubt that he bankrupted a casino in Atlantic City. There is no doubt that Trump is an extremely influential New Yorker. There is also no doubt that Trump is egotistical, mean, and brutish, and has been for basically all of his life. Basically thinking, if you look at the art of the deal and the way he ran The Apprentice, and even the way he runs the White House today, that the most aggressive, most thoughtful, and most passionate approach will get there. And it's perfectly okay to be insulting and rude as long as you are passionate and successful. So Trump's excuse for his behavior throughout all of his life has been that he is massively successful. This will translate into his presidency as well. So, yes, and people are pointing out he was born into success. Yes, so was Jeff Bezos. So was a lot of ultra rich people. The idea is that we suspend all laws of belief for Donald Trump. That we suspend all laws of belief and normalcy because we have to hate Donald Trump or we have to praise and love every single thing he does. There's nothing. This is the problem that we have. This is the problem the society and the culture have with Donald Trump and with anyone who supports him or anyone who voices anything. I get criticized simply because I have a balanced and nuanced perspective about this. The people who want to tear down Trump and destroy him, or at least politically, could do a lot better of a job if they would actually develop some nuance and not think that everything he does is literally what the Antichrist would do. So, now that I've made that point again, because people in the chat just want to constantly crap on the man no matter what, or constantly praise him no matter what, both of which are extraordinarily irritating to me, a man who works his tail off to be as objective as he possibly can, it's absurdity. And yes, I am an expert. I'm a historian, and I've studied both political science and history, so I am an expert, Carlos, you are not. So, Getting back to Trump, and I will talk about the Epstein files for those of you who are asking about it. In fact, I'm planning to do a video at some point in the near future where I discuss the Epstein files in detail because it's becoming one of the biggest historical phenomenons and in the 21st century. And no, I did not admit that Democrats want to destroy him. Destroying someone politically means defeating them. If people really wanted to successfully defeat Donald Trump, they would add nuance, they would keep their head high, and they would not stoop to his ways of behavior in order to do it. So, what happened next? And yes, I am wearing my smoking jacket. It's part of the formal wear here on the channel. Yeah, Justin is right. Love him or hate him, you can't ignore him. I don't know if he turned. It's pretty interesting that a reality TV star with a ego the size of Manhattan became the president of the United States. Now let's talk about how that happened. So despite Trump's many moral failings, his arguments with his beef with celebrities like Rosie O'Donnell and others, his cantankerous behavior, his rudeness, his success, whatever you want to say about the man, he obviously, once again, is hard to ignore. Now, the truth of the matter is that Donald Trump, whether you like it or not, whatever you think on the political spectrum, it's becoming more and more obvious, saved the Republican Party. Now, what do I mean by that? In 2008, the economy crashed, and Barack Obama was easily elected the first African-American president in U.S. history, smashing John McCain. 4 years later, the Republicans picked another neoconservative-like figure who believes in intervention in the Middle East, and Mitt Romney. The Republicans had kind of lost their way into kind of being a more moderate version of the party of Reagan, and were falling behind because the tactics of Reagan that were so successful in the 80s were not the tactics necessary for the 2000s and the 2010s. And the people who were who were watching Reagan's throne on the Republican side and on the right were more moderate versions of that. And of course, with the Iraq wars, George W. Bush's presidency, the Iraq war, the war in Afghanistan, George W. Bush's presidency cascading into a total crash. The Republican Party had seemingly lost its way. It won advantages in Congress, but it seemingly had fallen behind in the culture wars. It had no major influence outside of talk radio and the growing forces on the internet. And it needed a rallying figure. And Trump, who is very good at identifying issues, and maybe not very good at solving them, but very good at identifying issues and pouncing when he wants his advantages, saw this and had been teasing about running for president for 2012 as early as 2008. He really did not like Barack Obama, and despite the fact that Trump had been a liberal Democrat who had supported people like Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton before, he had been slowly shifting to the right, a common phenomenon for people as they get older. But he also really despised Barack Obama, really had a problem with Obama. I think he envied Obama's charisma and appeal, and Trump is very, very quick to envy anyone who has charisma and appeal and quick to want to throw them off the side. But Trump perpetuated a story starting in, I think, about 2009, 2010, that had originally been introduced by people who had worked with Hillary Clinton, but the Clinton campaign during the Democratic primary in 2008 had backed off of it. And thank you, Emir. I'm having a great day thanks to your super chat. But President Trump, or Donald Trump at the time, basically took a narrative that some Democrats had pettily run with in the primary and basically blew it up out of proportion, saying that President Obama was not born in the United States but actually was from Kenya and that his birth certificate was forged. Amid accusations of racism, malfeasance, disingenuity, and all sorts of other deceptions, this put Trump in the political theater squarely. Perhaps that's what he wanted all along, not necessarily to be right about the issue or not, but to give people a reason to look into him as a political figure standing up to Barack Obama, even with a completely false and utterly ridiculous narrative, such as the birther argument, as it was called. Trump teased a run in 2012. He obviously was popular amongst the Republicans, but probably did not want to go up against Barack Obama because Trump doesn't like to get involved in something unless he thinks he can win it. But yes, thank you, Tanya, for sending a gift membership to Justin. He deserves it. But yes, Trump did not run in 2012. The Republicans picked Mitt Romney. Romney lost badly to Obama. Trump might have not run because he might not have been able to beat the incumbency and charisma of Barack Obama. Many people believe to this day that Obama would beat Trump in a head-to-head race. But Trump continued to tease the possibility of running in 2016, and 2016 would be indeed when he decided to run. Over 10 years ago now, believe it or not, President Trump, or Donald Trump, entered the presidential race on the Republican side. He had been shifting politically, moving more to the right on certain issues. He had previously been pro-universal health care, pro-choice, and 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 he had been pro gun control. So he had shifted significantly on some of these issues to the right, but had always been talking about trade deals and problems with the international economy. Trump, despite his wealth, despite his yuppie status in New York, was against a lot of free trade aspects that are quintessential to classic capitalism, because he believed that they were actually deals that were hurting the American worker, the American manufacturer, and American businesses, and were creating huge trade deficits and only benefiting the partners of the trade deals and not the Americans the way that they needed to. This included trade deals with China, Japan, Canada, Mexico, and all sorts of other countries, which is why Trump, during his first term, started it, but really in his second term has kicked into high gear his whole tariff portfolio, basically believing that these nations need to be punished for enacting bad trade deals on the United States, and if they're willing to negotiate and actually come to the table, maybe he can reverse some of the punishments. So Trump likes to act like the punishing parent with some clemency afterwards, not just in America, with American politics, but with geopolitics in general. This is the way he sees himself. Yes. Yes, Harry, I know very well that I'm not saying that that's not wrong. I'm saying that I don't care about that right now. I'm explaining history. So, anyways, and Uncle Joe, I don't think anyone could make that claim at this point. So Trump wanting to make these trade deals or wanting to back out of certain trade deals was a huge part of his portfolio, and the portfolio was to put America first, a MAGA, make America great again. Believing America had been in a series of decline, Trump rallied a contingent of the right that was more or less disenfranchised with the classic traditional Republican side, and were more interested in speaking and work and help and in someone who spoke and thought and helped spoke and fought and helped them get better deals, bring back manufacturing, restabilize the American middle class, which had been eroding for some time. And even if that meant breaking some traditional rules of free market economics, so be it if it made it better for the American workers, the American farmers, and American industries. This was Trump's big goal. And he started to create a coalition of working class Republicans who, many of them had been Democrats before, but started to warm up to the Republican Party. The party of the rich and wealthy had been the Republicans for a long time, but Trump, although being rich and wealthy himself and not a member of the working class by any stretch of the imagination, spoke to people in a very plain way that appealed to working class people, that appealed to poor Republicans and people like that in the South and in certain areas of the country. And he surprisingly was extraordinarily popular because a lot of people thought that he talked common sense. Trump's other big major linchpin issue, which has been his linchpin issue in his second term as well, is immigration. Basically believing that countries were punishing the United States by sending immigrants, particularly Mexico, many of these immigrants who committed different crimes and were parts of cartels and were abusing people both above and below the southern border. Trump basically ran with the narrative that that American workers are suffering because immigrants are taking their jobs and getting paid poorer wages. This is hollowing out the American working class. But yeah, and he had all of these different. So he had these two platforms. He wanted to build a wall on the southern border to stop illegal immigration, an interesting concept that brought up a lot of questions of racism, xenophobia, nativism, and anti-immigrant rhetoric, anti-American rhetoric, anti-Hispanic rhetoric, that in 2016 seemed extremely controversial, and yet because of Trump's huge amount of influence, not just on the Republican Party, but on culture in general, has become kind of an afterthought. Part of his big, beautiful bill was funding for the border wall. So Trump did get his border wall eventually, getting part of it during his first term and the complete part of it in the second term. What I find fascinating is the Overton window shift, personally, where all of a sudden this thing that was a huge racist issue 8 years ago is now kind of just an afterthought for a bill that got criticized for a bunch of other reasons. So Trump had three main beliefs, although there were other parts to his platform. But you had the issues with trade. You had curbing immigration by basically allowing Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE, to go wild, which they have done in his second term, and building a border on the southern wall and making Mexico pay for the wall. Now, Mexico hasn't quite paid for it at the end of the day. That really didn't come true. But Trump, through tariffs, might very well claim that it did. Trump loves the bravado, and he loves to claim that he got what he wanted, even if he has to change exactly what he wanted by shifting the goalposts. This is something that he did in business. This is something a lot of business people do. In many ways, Trump is always advertising, always selling you something in one way or another. Now, I'm not saying that necessarily is bad. What made Trump popular was the way that he would sell you something without sounding like a traditional politician using big flowery language. Trump talked in a very simple simple way, was often very brutish, and insulted his opponents, first their opponents in the Republican primary, then his Democratic opponents, and has done it consistently for the last 10 years, making up nicknames that people would find funny, and most people would be horrified at, the founding fathers among them, by the way. But at the same time, the third part of Trump's campaign has become probably the most visible part of his continual fight, his continual struggle, whatever you want to call it. And that is the deep state. Trump believed that there were actors within the government who were doing everything in their power to basically control the country, to curb people's freedom, to to prioritize international powers, and to weaken the American people, and to target anyone who would ever point out their fallacious behavior and malfeasance within the government, using it to absorb more and more amounts of power for themselves, their corporate allies, and their interests. Now, the Democratic Party and the left-wing liberals had been the party of not trusting large corporations, not trusting corporate interests for a long time. But Trump gave a spin on this from a right-wing side, basically saying that the deep state was committed to destroying conservative voices everywhere, while also gaining more and more power for themselves and limiting people's freedom. This became, and he called this the deep state. He believed that the deep state was out to get him, that it was out to get a bunch of other conservative figures, and it was out to protect people like Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. So these are some big whoppers. And in 2016, a lot of people didn't think any of this really mattered or existed or made any sense. And yet Trump has had such a huge impact that whether you like or dislike what he has done, you have to admit that these things are in the forefront of people's political, in the forefront of the political zeitgeist of America and throughout the entire world, probably because of Trump. Trump has influenced nationalist movements in Europe that also are anti-immigrant. Trump has been an extraordinarily big supporter of right-wing politicians like Nigel Farage, Viktor Orban, and Benjamin Netanyahu. And so the idea that the deep state was out to get him has been a big narrative that Trump has run with. Trump has also run with a strange accusation from his opponents that he is part of the deep state, both with his cover-up of the Epstein files and his associations, his less than condemning nature and rhetoric surrounding Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump has kind of taken the attitude with Putin that the best thing to do is to be respectful to him and not get him angry, because you wouldn't like him when he gets angry, and you get more people with honey than with vinegar. An ironic approach to a foreign dictator that Trump doesn't have, and Trump has done this on multiple occasions, an approach that Trump doesn't have nearly at all with American politicians who are his foes. Perhaps Trump sees a difference between direct foes domestically and indirect foes internationally, such as Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. So, ironically enough, some of Trump's rhetoric around this was rhetoric and an approach taken by the Obama administration before. What happens next? So, getting back to 2016, Trump has to run through a Republican field of primed Republican candidates, many of whom are popular and interesting people, like Marco Rubio and Jeb Bush, the brother of George W. Bush, who's looking to revitalize the Bush name. Trump is competing against them. He's competing against neurosurgeon Ben Carson, Senator Ted Cruz. There's a lot of Republicans who seem to be pretty much your standard bearers for traditional conservative Republican policies, or maybe a more moderate form of that, who might actually get pretty far. And yet Trump trumps them all. He wins the primaries pretty overwhelmingly in pretty convincing fashion, and then faces his first major opponent. And this is where Act 1 of the Trump story winds down, and the second act, the surprising victory, begins. So Act 1 is Trump's background. Act 2 is the surprising victory. I don't think that it would be an exaggeration for me as a historian, looking at historical events that shock the world, to say that Trump winning the presidency in 2016 is one of maybe the top 20, if not one of the top 10 shockers in world history. Yes, world history. It's certainly in the top 5 in U.S. history. And why do I say that? I know it's only been 10 years and the effects of this are still being understood, and it's really hard to judge recent historical events. But the truth of the matter is that President Trump winning the presidency in 2016 shocked the entire world and has changed the entire world. The world would have been completely different had Hillary Clinton or a generic Republican who had defeated her had become president. There's no doubt about it. Everything changed because Trump became president. Everything changed in the United States. Everything changed in Europe. Relationships in Asia changed. The world has changed significantly because Trump came into the White House with that nationalist goal, got kind of a more moderate version of it done in his first term, and then with reckless abandon in his second term so far. And we're only 250 days into this. So what happens in the general election? Well, Hillary Clinton is seen as the odds-on favorite. Everyone believes that Trump is basically kind of running as a joke at first, and then he wins the primary, and they're like, okay, well, he's still not going to be president. He'll lose to Hillary Clinton, and then things will continue with the neoliberal, neoconservative agenda that we've had for a long time, where Republicans and Democrats don't like each other and fight against each other, but we don't have anyone as bombastically aggressive and rude as Donald Trump. A lot of people were underestimating Trump. This became a problem. This becomes a pattern. Anytime Trump is underestimated, he wins, and anytime he is overestimated, he loses. It's that simple. So the Trump's general election performance against Hillary Clinton gets off to a rocky start. There's tons of scandals surrounding his personal life. There's the affair he had with the adult film star while his wife was pregnant. That obviously doesn't sit well with a lot of people who are being called on to support Trump. Obviously, Trump cannot get into the White House without the support of white evangelicals. In order to appease white evangelicals who really have problems with his moral character, Trump promises them conservative justices on the Supreme Court who are bound to overturn Roe v. Wade, the abortion ruling from 1973, which basically allowed women up to the third trimester of their pregnancy to have no restrictions on abortion access. This obviously changes significantly because of that. But the fascinating, so Trump appeases the evangelical crowd with this, who continues to bear the weights and scars of giving into Trumpism and doubling down. It seems like everybody, whether they support Trump or hate him, have decided that they're going to double down and become more and more radicalized in how they double down. They support things they never would have supported 10 years ago, and they oppose things they never would have opposed 10 years ago just because of Trump. That is how you shift the overturn window. So you've got the appeasement of the evangelicals. What really hurts Trump badly, I think it came out in September or maybe even early October, but is a tape from NBC from 20 years before, when Trump, with a fellow celebrity, a producer by the name of Billy Bush, commented on what he liked to do with women and gave some implications that he liked to do pretty unspeakable things, and some implication that he liked to do it without full consent. This really, really hurt his chances. It looked like he was dead in the water. It looked like it was over. So Trump looked like it was over. And every time Trump looks like he's done with, he just comes back stronger than he was before. Clinton's problem is that she struggled with corruption charges. She had been the Secretary of State and supposedly had kept a private email server, putting classified American government documents on that email server. She was not necessarily likable. She tried to run on the coattails of the Obama administration, having been the Secretary of State, but she was obviously, there were questions about the corruption of the Clintons going back to the 1980s when they had been in Arkansas, and then in the 90s when they had been in the White House with her husband Bill. This, mixed with a couple of debates where Trump clearly had the edge over her, was quite a fascinating appeal. If you want a good example of what Trump actually thinks and who he was appealing to and how he was appealing to them, the first debate they had, I believe it was the first debate, Hillary Clinton hit Trump about paying taxes. Here's a guy who says he supports the working class, but he doesn't actually pay his taxes, and we won't see his tax returns. It was the second debate, actually. And Trump famously said to her that all of her donors, she could have changed these rules when she was a senator. But all of her donors, or Secretary of State, are pushed for these changes when she was in power. But she never did, because all of the donors to her benefited from the same tax breaks to the wealthy that he did. And the question that Trump got, that I think is one of the most famous because he's received so many questions, was, do you believe that the system is rigged against you? Because Trump had repeatedly said he would not accept the election results unless he won. The only way Trump believes that an election is free and fair is if he wins, which, if you look at history, there's some bad patterns there, to be sure. But he famously says, I know the system is rigged because I use it, and so do all of her donors. I know how the system works. I know money in politics. And this was the thing that made Trump extremely appealing to middle-class and working-class people all across the country who had felt left behind by the Republicans, and many of whom had been Democrats but were starting to feel left behind by the Democrats, was that Republicans and Democrats, politicians especially, had talked down to these people for a long time. And now you had somebody who was willing to say, no, everything you're starting to think about the system being broken, it's broken. And I know it's broken because I'm part of it, but I'm reformed. I'm going to fix it. Now, whether he's fixed it or not is another issue, and there's plenty of dubiousness around that, and doubt to be sure. But Trump was coming out with a perspective that nobody had ever heard before, because no one had ever heard this except from fringe figures. Now the nominee of one of the two major political parties was saying this, and was coming out in a huge way. It was a huge hit to the Clinton campaign that Trump, despite all of his rudeness, despite all of his insults, despite how nasty he was appealing to people in normal ways. Trump hit Clinton on everything. He talked about Bill Clinton's affairs with women, how he abused women. He talked about he had criticized Hillary's handling when she was Secretary of State of the Benghazi scandal. Clinton received major strikes from Trump in major ways that were extraordinarily petty and extraordinarily nasty, as Trump usually did. Taking to his favorite social media platform, Twitter, Trump would write long, rambling posts in which he would criticize her or anyone else, giving them nicknames. The nickname he had for her was Crooked Hillary. Capitalizing and antagonizing her over her corruption charges, Trump promised his supporters started to cheer at his events, lock her up, and something Trump said that he would look into. He eventually reneged on this, basically saying that he wasn't going to do it. However, Trump, whether it's learning his lesson, or simply becoming a more vindictive, bitter man, or a combination of both, or some other third option, has basically decided during this term that he will strike back at political enemies who he believes are corrupt. He will not wait. He will not give him a pass in the sake of unity, because he doesn't believe that unity is possible with people who hate him. And that is why James Comey just got indicted, for instance. Or at least one of the reasons James Comey got indicted, for instance. And the reason Christopher Wray might be next. So the election's getting close. Most people will expect Hillary Clinton to win pretty convincingly. She has a lockdown on most of the major swing states, and Trump is falling behind in the polls. The Billy Bush tape really hurts him. A lot of people cannot even picture the idea of Donald Trump becoming the U.S. president, which is why, I think it was November 4th, the biggest surprise happens. Trump surprises the entire world. He wins most of the swing states. He comes close in the popular vote. The Democrats have huge advantages back then, had huge advantages in the popular vote 10 years ago because of California and New York being such strong Democratic states, the two of the three largest states in the Union. And Trump wins in a surprising fashion and wins decisively. It's not like one state decided it. It was several different states, most notably the states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, what's called the Rust Belt. The working class Joes, the blue-collar people that Trump had been appealing to and that Clinton had seemingly ignored, taking their vote for granted because they were legacy Democrats whose parents and grandparents had been Democrats, the descendants of the coal miners and steel workers who remembered what they believed to be the glory days, picked Donald Trump to bring back their manufacturing, to bring back their glory days. That hasn't necessarily happened, but the power and the influence of Trump had gone far. And Trump was able to pull off the upset and defeat Hillary Clinton and become the 45th president of the United States, shocking Barack Obama, who had said that Trump would never have become president, and then Trump is sitting next to him in the White House preparing to take over. So let's talk about his first term. Trump's first term is a mire of two different things. One, relative policy success. Trump does get some of his border wall. The economy seems to be doing pretty well under Trump. And he passes big tax cuts that he believes helps the economy tremendously. Trump does do a lot during his first term that seemingly is accomplishing his goal. He puts the conservative justices on the court. I'm not saying this is good or bad, by the way. I'm just talking about when it comes to achieving what he wants. And a lot of people get the sense by the late 2019 that Trump is actually going to win a second term. That as bad and nasty as he is, people have kind of been used to it. We've had 5 years of Trump talking like this, and yes, we know he's brutish and bad, but we like the way things are going, so we'll give him another term. That's what a lot of people think is going to happen. Secondly, Trump is also mired in scandals. He's impeached in 2019 for a meeting with Ukrainian president, a man that you don't know by the name of Volodymyr Zelensky. Yes, that Volodymyr Zelensky. Because he supposedly tells Zelensky that he wants information on his major political opponent. Now, Hillary Clinton losing kind of pushes her to the side, and the major threat to Trump now becomes I'm sorry, I'm blanking. I'm going to pick another background picture that's more fitting. The major threat to Trump now becomes Joe Biden, President Obama's likable, although bumbling vice president. And if you don't, and yes, I use those words both as an opinion word, but I think both of them are verifiably true. So basically, Trump feels that there is information about Joe Biden's family and their connections to different organizations within Ukraine, like Burisma, and that they gained a bunch of money through basically bribes through that operation because they were related to the vice president of the United States, something that Biden and his family denied repeatedly until it turned out to be true. So Trump Trump got this got him impeached. He also underwent an investigation from the head of the FBI, a man named Robert Mueller, and this led to the Mueller report. Now, what is the story behind this? This is the Russia collusion narrative that has actually been proven to be basically false. Trump basically demanded, there was a belief that Russia had been trying to influence elections. Now, Russia always tries to influence American elections, as do other political powers. This is not uncommon. The U.S. has done it itself in many, many more obvious and ridiculous ways. But the theory around President Trump's first election in 2016 is that he got elected because Russia influenced, produced fake news, influenced voter turnout, and actually changed the vote count in many of the crucial swing states, which led Trump to the White House. And this led to a narrative created by a dossier of files called the Steele dossier that was eventually purchased and released at first purchased by the Clinton campaign and then later released, that basically said Trump was in league with Putin, and Putin and him were working together, and that there had been credible amounts of information that Trump's colleagues and people in his campaign, as well as Trump himself, were under the thumb and influence of the Kremlin. Now, there was also a rumor that Trump had had Russian prostitutes urinate on him in a Russian hotel, and that he was basically Vladimir Putin's lapdog. All of this turned out to be false, fake news, as Trump likes to call it, which Trump is pretty good at producing himself. But basically, the Steele dossier was a huge hit piece on President Trump. It turned out to be completely fabricated and completely untrue. What has come out to be true recently is that President Obama, his intelligence people, such as his National Intelligence Agency head, James Clapper, the CIA director John Brennan, and the Clinton campaign themselves perpetuated this knowing it was a myth. They didn't just perpetuate it out of good faith, they perpetuated it out of bad faith, even after Trump had been elected and the election was over, even with evidence clearly indicating that the Russians had not significantly impacted the election. They continued to perpetuate this myth, which has basically sent Trump into a tirade with his second term, with his National Intelligence Director Tulsi Gabbard, and the Department of Justice doing everything they can to put a lot of high-ranking people from the Obama years in jail. So now, is this political revenge, or is this frustration over a fake narrative around Trump? You decide. I'm just saying what has actually happened. So the Russia collusion narrative was believed for a long time by many people in America, and the Democrats in particular grabbed onto this and basically made the narrative that Donald Trump was a Russian puppet and a Russian asset who was only in power because Vladimir Putin wanted a puppet in the White House. This narrative continues even to this day among people, when it has become almost demonstrably true that that wasn't the case. Now, as a historian, it's very hard for me to believe, as an American and as a historian simultaneously, I don't want to believe that a president, regardless of his political beliefs or behaviors, is an asset of a foreign country. I certainly don't believe that Barack Obama was born in Kenya and under the influence of Islam, like Donald Trump intimated, and I certainly don't believe that Donald Trump was a Russian asset. So there's a lot to think about there. What happens next? So the Mueller report is released in 2019. This had hogtied a lot of Trump's efforts because a lot of people had basically thrown around corruption charges and all sorts of other things at him. But basically it turned out that Mueller said there was not enough evidence to actually show collusion, but there was the possibility of collusion, basically saying Trump was not guilty but not innocent. And the evidence that has come out since then seems to imply that Trump was indeed innocent. Going into 2020, it looks like Trump has a pretty good chance of winning re-election. The Democrats are kind of trying to figure out who their nominee is going to be. Will they embrace a socialist like Bernie Sanders, or will they go with a mainstream Democrat, Joe Biden? Now, for the record, I don't mean any ill will by this, but I remember 2020 very, very well. I remember 2016 very, very well. And I remember in 2020, it was very obvious to everybody before he became the Democratic nominee that Joe Biden was in steep mental decline. It was obvious that he wasn't the same man he had been even when he was vice president 5 years previously. He had clearly started to diminish in mental capabilities as well as cognitive recognition, and clearly was not suited to be president. And the Democrats themselves for a long time had seemingly believed this. Biden has a lifelong stutter. He had struggled with that throughout his life, but he was also struggling to put together cohesive statements, appearances. He wasn't answering questions with the press. He had difficult interactions with the press, and he was really struggling through the Democratic primary, and then was revitalized just in time to win the Super Tuesday Democratic primaries and knock Bernie Sanders into second place. So, um, what else am I saying? The whole point is, so Biden was not really on the agenda, but eventually he comes back, and he kind of has the nomination wrapped up by March. But in March, things hit the fan. The COVID-19 pandemic, which had begun in Wuhan, China, comes to the United States, goes to all around the world, and all of a sudden lockdowns are implemented all throughout the world, even in the United States, with shelter-in-place, stay-at-home orders issued throughout every single state in the United States and the District of Columbia. Trump himself will fall prey to COVID, basically getting COVID, downplaying the effects of COVID, and then getting COVID is not a very good look for him. And basically, the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic becomes the biggest issue of the 2020 presidential campaign. How do you reopen the economy? How do you get a vaccine? How do you get treatments? How do you get medicines? How do you actually get people to stop dying from this thing? And Trump's slow reaction to it is heavily criticized. Trump's continual fights with the head of the National Health Service, Dr. Anthony Fauci, is consistently criticized. And Trump himself has kind of a moderate approach to COVID, where many of his supporters start to become very, very skeptical of where COVID actually came from, of how dangerous COVID actually was, and how necessary the lockdowns were. Trump receives criticism from the right because Governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, a future presidential candidate himself, reopens Florida ahead of schedule, while Trump still believes it's best for places to be shut down, eventually kind of giving it into an agnosticism but allows governors to decide when they want to open up. This leads to early open-ups in red states like Texas and Florida, and late open-ups in places like Minnesota and California. Speaking of Minnesota, race relations simmer, which have been simmering underneath during Trump's administration. Trump has used very volatile rhetoric around race and has been accused of being a racist on multiple different occasions. Explodes when George Floyd is killed at the end of May in Minneapolis, leading to a series of riots. Later killing of I forget the man's name, in Kenosha, Wisconsin, leads to riots there. One group of rioters actually stormed the U.S. Capitol, and Trump actually leaves the White House for a brief period in July. This is what's called the Summer of Love, where basically you have different activist groups protesting and rioting, some protesting, some rioting throughout the country, creating a very, very antagonistic and divisive narrative around race relations with people in organizations, professors, academics, politicians, all of them calling for reparations, social justice, an understanding of white privilege, and an acknowledgement of not just racial identity, but of systematic privileges that white people have in the United States. So race relations get horrible in 2020. The race riots are extraordinarily bad. Trump faces criticism from the left for obviously they think he's a racist, and criticism from the right for not sending in the National Guard to Kenosha, Wisconsin to stomp the riots out there. One reason that Trump has used the National Guard so willingly during his second term is probably because of this. And I can't believe that this has actually taken me 45 minutes to talk about. So Trump is facing the problems with the pandemic. He's also facing his struggles with the race issues of the country. He's facing a nation that is in chaos. The economy is collapsed because of COVID, and things look really bad. And the debates he has with Joe Biden are nasty fracases. Trump looks frazzled and angry during most of them. Biden seems to be a leader who's at least promising to do something good. Trump's continual rhetoric about COVID is continually criticized. He is accused, as he always has been, of pushing fake news and false narratives. And this leads eventually to the election. Now, many people, once again, were projecting that Trump would be stormed out of power, and the Republicans would lose a huge amount of support in both the House and the Senate. This doesn't happen. Trump actually comes now, whatever you believe about the 2020 election, which has become the most controversial election perhaps in U.S. history, Trump does not lose overwhelmingly. At the very least, he loses in a close election with Biden, where mail-in ballots, which a lot of people have because of the pandemic, end up making the difference, where Trump had large leads from initial voters who voted on election day. The mail-in ballots overwhelmingly favor Democrats, who were much more likely to shelter in place because of the pandemic and much more concerned about COVID-19. This overwhelmingly favors Democrats and allows them to win the key swing states and allows Joe Biden to become president and the Democrats to eventually take over the Senate and expand their lead or hold on to their lead in the U.S. House of Representatives. So despite the fact that a lot of people believed it would be an absolute shellacking, Trump actually is pretty close. However, he is not gracious in defeat. And he doesn't believe that he's been defeated. To this day, he doesn't believe it. Although he has indicated that he lost, technically, he has never admitted that the election was free or fair. Basically accusing the system of being rigged and pulling out the stop from 2016, Trump says that the election was stolen and that the voting machines, the voter rolls, all of it was rigged against him, and that thousands of votes were stolen from him. This leads to him demanding that votes be found for him in Georgia so that he has enough to win in that state. Basically, accusing and sending lawyers to promote lawsuits, accusing Biden and the Democrats of stealing the election. This turns into a years-long problem with questions over voting machines, voting integrity, mail-in ballots, how they were counted, and why certain things were done the way they were. The most obvious reason being the COVID-19 pandemic and the fact that this election was unlike any other election. Obviously, kind of didn't enter into the register for Trump and his supporters. They believe that the election was stolen from him. So, this leads to January 6th, which is probably the most controversial moment in Trump's entire presidency. Yes, believe it or not. Supporters of Trump march on the U.S. Capitol after hearing him speak at the White House, demanding that Congress does not certify the results from the election. Now, it is true that both Democrats and Republicans in the past had voted against certifying election results because they believed elections had been stolen. Democrats believed that George W. Bush stole both of his elections, and Republicans had concerns about Barack Obama, especially in 2008. But this was different. Tens of thousands of people marched all over the country, but the most notable one was in Washington, D.C., from the White House to the Capitol building, and 1,000 of them broke into the Capitol and fought with Capitol police officers, and one woman was shot and killed, who was one of the rioters. They went into the Capitol chambers. They broke into the offices of some leading ranking members of Congress. The vice president, who had been Trump's lackey, Mike Pence, or Trump's associate, I should say, was evacuated, as were several high-ranking members, as was the entire Congress, because the Capitol had been stormed, and it is one of the most controversial moments, with a lot of people going back and saying that the full footage was not released, that they were let in. FBI agitators had pushed them into the building to try to make them look bad. There had been a lot going on. There was a lot to that entire story. This led people to the slow response from Trump, along with other rumors that turned out not to be true, that Trump himself wanted to go to the Capitol and storm the Capitol along with his protesters and be made king or something like that. Both of these things led to an investigation into Trump called the January 6th Committee, where basically Congress looked into Trump's actions to see if he had been responsible for causing the riot, because at the rally before at the White House, Trump had demanded his people fight. Fight like hell so that they could get the election results overturned, believing that they were rigged and cheated out of an election. Trump had stoked the fires of what many believed was a false narrative, and many still believe was a false narrative, that the 2020 election had been stolen from him. This would be, now, how do you come back from this? Your supporters, some of them, and many believe that you are responsible for it, stormed the U.S. Capitol, you lost the election, you leave the White House in disgrace 2 weeks later. How do you come back from this? It looked like Trump was over, but once again, when Trump is over, he's not over. He instantly becomes a fixture in trying to get his own people who support his policies elected to the Congress and the Senate in the 2022 midterms, and begins plans to run for 2024 to get a non-consecutive term. He'd only be the second U.S. president to do it, and shocking surprise, you all know this, he does end up doing that. But he doesn't do that without problems. He faces legal charges throughout 2023 and 2024, including accusations that he paid hush money to Stormy Daniels, the adult film actress that he had an affair with when his wife was pregnant with his son. And that had paid her hush money so she would keep it private, which is illegal. Trump was eventually convicted of this and found guilty on all 34 felony charges, which basically allowed every one of his opponents to bring up the fact that if you're voting for him, you're voting for a felon, and felons can't own guns, so why can't felons be president? Now Trump is not a felon in the same way that a murderer is a felon. I want to get that. There are different classes and different restrictions for different types of felons in the U.S. However, that's not the point. The point is that Donald Trump dealt with heavy legal issues. He had lawsuits. E. Jean Carroll accused him of assaulting her in a particular way, and he was found And he sued her. His lawsuit went nowhere, and he was liable for her for defaming her by saying she was wrong for saying that. So basically, a judge said that Trump did in fact assault her. And at the same time, Trump was also brought to court in New York for he had since moved to Florida, but he was brought to court in New York for overestimating his property values. This led to the famous Letitia James trial. There was another trial in Georgia over him demanding that votes be gotten for him so he could win the election there in 2020. So basically, the truth of the matter is that Trump dealt with all sorts of legal ramifications and all sorts of comeuppance throughout 2023 and 2024. But the amazing historical reality is that these comeuppance only make him more popular with his base. The Trump base has been growing and digging in. And problems with immigration, a weak economy, and questions of Joe Biden's leadership turned the American people back to Trump. And even replacing Biden mid-race with Kamala Harris, who isn't extraordinarily likable, doesn't necessarily help them too much. And Trump is actually able to, not as much, but still surprise people that the 34-time felon who supposedly led an insurrection on January 6th goes back to the White House to be the president of the United States again. He wins the 2024 election by an even wider margin than 2016. He wins the popular vote. And many of his supporters, even some of them in the chat, will say that Trump won 3 times. So, again, I'm not saying that any of these things are necessary. I'm not saying what I think of any of these things necessarily. I am saying it is pretty incredible that Trump probably made the greatest political comeback in American history, basically going from being down out on his luck, being the one blamed for January 6th, being seen as a menace, even within his own party. Many people in 2022 wanted to replace him, but he eventually got hold of the Republican Party again and was able to use the weakness of the Biden presidency to basically launch him into the White House for a second term and maybe for a third win. We don't know. So I'm not tipping my hand one way or another. This is just the actual historical facts of what happened and some of the analysis of how it ended up. And Uncle Joe's asking, why didn't Trump serve time for 34 felonies? The felony conviction was thrown out, or not the conviction, the felony sentencing was thrown out because he'd been elected president. The judge did not sentence him to jail, which he could have done. But, so there's that. But anyway, so Trump makes this huge political comeback. He wins the White House. And now he has been kind of given carte blanche in many ways. The Republicans have the House and the Senate for now to get done his agenda. And he has become far more aggressive in getting his agenda done than he was in his first term. Basically, now doing everything he can to deport as many people as he can. And thank you, Emir. I really appreciate that. I'm trying to be as fair and objective as I possibly can. Trump is using immigration and customs enforcement to get rid of millions of illegal immigrants, particularly those who came during the 4 years where there was a weak border during the Biden administration. Trump also is is focused on settling wars such as Russia and Ukraine and Israel-Gaza, although that really hasn't come to fruition, so he's kind of had to walk back on that. Trump is interested in settling the trade wars and things like that, and of course is also trying to working with Elon Musk and others, has focused on stripping government agencies of their power, cutting back on their employees, and trying to cut waste, fraud, and abuse through DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, which he has created. So, anyways, so that's basically what's happened. Coast Sider brought up something that's absolutely ridiculously untrue, but reminded me of something that I need to mention. Trump is only the second U.S. president to be shot while running for president, while not in the White House. Just like Theodore Roosevelt, his hero, and one of the presidents that he's comparable to, Trump was shot in Butler, Pennsylvania, while running for a second term, with many people believing that political violence and hatred of Donald Trump had led the shooter to do it, a man by the name of Thomas Crooks. A month later, another man was found trying to target Trump for a potential assassination and eventually living, with political violence and political division and divisiveness getting worse and worse, and Trump obviously contributing to this, but other factors as well. So, Agus is mentioning the media propaganda. I have to talk about that. The media, the propaganda about the media, Trump's biggest enemy has been the media. He has been a huge critic of the media. He calls them fake news and has fought with them continuously and won some battles and lost some others where trust in the mainstream media. But the biggest victory and another shift in the overturn window is that the media has gone from being the reliable, albeit left-leaning source of information in the United States to being the clear a clear a clear critic of a president in almost every endeavor, and has clearly tipped its own hand seeking to defeat him. So Trump has been able to gain a lot of sympathy by basically showing how biased and non-objective the U.S. media is in many ways, with of course Fox News being an example of the right, being just as biased but not as influential. If you don't have cable, you don't have Fox News, but you can turn on any television and you can get CBS, for instance. But showing the bias of the American press and media has been a huge way for Trump to gain sympathy. Although the truth of the matter is that, I mean, everybody has a bias. It's hard to hide a bias. But I can do I do daily news updates here on the channel and discuss something that Trump is doing without using adjectives or adverbs to describe his behavior and therefore sound extremely objective, whereas CNN somehow cannot do that. So Trump has influenced a lot of people, myself included, indirect way, not that I'm listening to him necessarily, but to look at the media and really have a critique of how news is delivered and information is delivered. Who was that in the chat? Like Tom is saying, a lot of people just come with the idea that the mainstream media sucks and is in the pocket of one party or another, usually the Democrats. So Trump has changed a lot. He's changed the way Americans think about immigration. He's changed the way Americans think about nationalism. He's changed the way Americans think about media. And this bombastic, over-the-top individual, no matter how stupid you may think he is actually quite brilliant. And maybe that's the worst part of it if you don't like him, and maybe the best part if you do like him. The over-the-top antics, the ridiculous jokes, the insults, it's all part of a conniving, intentional way to rally his forces and to demonize his opponents. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. Many people have done this before. It's not something new. Maybe my biggest thesis in this entire live stream lecture, which has lasted an hour, is that Donald Trump is not as new and novel and surprising as you think. If you study history, you will know this. You will look at Andrew Jackson and Theodore Roosevelt and Franklin Roosevelt and Lyndon Johnson and see presidents who acted in similar ways to Donald Trump. And that demonizing your opponents is just how politics is. Perhaps what Trump did more than any other president since Andrew Jackson, or even more than Andrew Jackson, who he has a portrait of in the White House, is bring to the surface the nasty nature of politics that we have in this world, because he acted nasty and then people started acting nasty back. Lyndon Johnson was one of the nastiest, most aggressive presidents and politicians during his political career, and he was known for getting in people's faces, yelling at them and berating them, and then laughing and cajoling them. But people didn't know that. That was all buried underneath his exterior. Maybe what Trump has done is brought all of that to the forefront. And with social media becoming such a predominant part of American life during his presidency especially, maybe that's just what America needed. But at the end of the day, his entire goal has been to make America great again. And I can't decide if he has done that or not yet. History will be the one that will ultimately decide that. And history is still being told. So why would I, a historian, talk about the current president of the United States? Well, I did so in a historical context, which means I did it as objectively as I could. And I also did it with looking forward to the future so that I will have more idea of what Trump's first and second terms actually did. 3.5 more years of Donald Trump. The MAGA movement is here to stay. The Republican Party is forever changed by this. American politics is forever changed by this. And geopolitics is forever changed by this. Nationalism is on the rise. If you want to call it Nazism and fascism, you can, but that means that you don't understand what Nazism and fascism are. But yeah. I try to be as objective as possible, Joshua. How was I not objective? I don't think it's a pause. I think it's a change. And I think it's a change that was boiling under the surface, and Trump just tapped into it in a way that was unforeseeable. But yes, a lot of people, basically, when someone tells me I'm biased about this topic or another topic, I know that they just don't like that I rubber stamp their own biases and predilections about a particular individual. People who call me biased for all sorts of reasons, but maybe Richard Nixon. We'll have to vote on Richard Nixon. But yes, you guys voted for Trump in a historical context. I gave you Trump in a historical context. I'm not tipping my hand. A lot of historians, people who claim to be historians, will just constantly berate Trump because most historians are from academia, and academia is on the left wing. And I understand that academia is on the left wing. I come from that background. But, I mean, I was trained in academia. So I have a lot of experience with very, very liberal thinking people on many, many issues. And that's perfectly okay. I remember in 2016 in one of my history classes, it was about colonial history, and all the professor could talk about was Trump and how much he hated Trump. And I'm like, okay, I get it. I understand why academics, why intellectuals dislike Trump so overwhelmingly. I get that impression. And there's a lot to dislike in many ways. especially with personal behavior, for instance. Policy is another issue. But that doesn't mean that there's not things to like, and that doesn't mean that that negates my job of being the most objective person possible. Our job as historians is to tell the truth. So hopefully I have told the truth about Donald Trump. I have not lied. I have not manipulated the information. I have not sought to make you think a certain way about him. I have only presented one of the most fascinating, and fascinating I use in a neutral way, not great or bad necessarily, our most interesting American presidents in America's history. And I think that you can take to the bank no matter what you think of Donald Trump. Anyways, so that wraps us up. I've gone an hour just talking about this. And that's our live stream lecture on Donald Trump. Hopefully I don't have to hear as many questions about him in the chat because people want me to talk about this endlessly. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. And if you didn't like it, like and subscribe anyways. You guys can talk about how biased I am or how I'm one way or another. But I think the thing that I've been able to do best on this channel is remain objective because people are always calling me a left-wing nutjob or a right-wing bigot. So. Can Richard Nixon be on the next live stream lecture topic vote? We can have him on the vote. We just want to talk about it objectively, and you didn't. I don't know. How did I not talk about it objectively? Let me see. The definition of fascism is from Mussolini and is called autocratic dictatorship. It is a dictatorship. I don't think anyone thinks you're right-wing. That's not true. Harsonet, who is one of my moderators, thinks I'm right-leaning. Harry certainly thinks that I'm right-leaning, but that's because he's a Brit and he's a National Socialist, so according to a National Socialist, everyone is right-leaning. But Joshua, that's not true. That people don't think that that people think I'm. Let's ask Desmond. That no one thinks I'm right wing. Desmond, what do you think that Desmond? I know you've come on and talked about Trump in very positive fashion. Did I do a good job handling this topic? Let me know. And Harry is so biased. Harry is pretty biased. And maybe that's what I dislike more than anything. People who want to talk about social studies with only the point of making an objective goal, rather of making a point, rather than realizing that the beauty of history, the beauty of social studies, is learning how humans behave. What about the insurrection again? I don't think, okay, let me give you my own take on that. Since we're talking about it, I'm not going to charge a fee for that. I don't think that Trump caused the insurrection. I don't. I would call it the Capitol riot. I don't think that there was a plan. An insurrection gives the implication that there was a plan. But my whole point is that I think that basically that wasn't an insurrection. I don't think he's responsible for it, but I think he acted poorly in that circumstance, not calling them out, not condemning it as fast as he could. So I think you're defo on the right, but not the far right, but defo right. So. I think from a British perspective, I'd be on the right simply because I'm not super on the left, because the British politics is far more to the left than the American. So if you were proportional, I probably would be in the center, is what I think is actually the truth, Harry. I think you're so far on the left, you think that I'm on the right. That's also part of it. Do you think the USA supported the wrong side in the Suez Canal crisis? It would have been interesting had they let the French and British hold on to it. I wonder if Nasser would have been able to hold on to power. And today is Nasser's death anniversary. I do daily history, daily birthdays, and daily death videos here on the channel, like who died in history. So let me know. How am I stupid, Cutthroat? How long are you going to stream today? I'll go another 10 minutes answering questions. He caused it. See, there you go. Can't make anyone happy. They showed up with gallows. How was it not planned? I'm not saying that it wasn't. That it was. When I say it wasn't planned, it wasn't planned by Trump and his associates for this to turn into that. Some of the people there wanted Mike Pence hung. Now that's awful. That's despicable. I don't think Trump wanted Mike Pence hung. He did make a tweet that was really ridiculous, and for this he got canceled. Oh, he also getting canceled off social media and changing the social media narrative so much that Elon Musk bought Twitter was a huge part of Trump's thing too. But saying that Pence was cowardly. All these political labels are funny. You all obviously have read history enough to see how political ideologies have changed since Reagan. It's true. I get that it's all about how we interpret things, but you're rubber stamping the CNN story. So I'm rubber stamping the CNN story, and I'm saying that Trump didn't cause an insurrection, and I'm terrible. It's just you guys are showing more about what you think than what I think, both left and right. You're showing more about your bias than I am. When I'm in the middle, I'm on the right to the left. When I'm in the middle, I'm on the left to the right. Insurrectionists have guns. Okay. I hate both sides, bunch of rich... fair enough. Will Trump stay in the White House? Oh, by the way, the Epstein thing, Trump not releasing the Epstein files is definitely part of the whole a huge, huge letdown and broken promise from his campaign, at least mostly. Um, Trump has been very mini-mouthed about this and hasn't looked good. I think if I were to give an opinion on that, I think that it's very likely that he just wants it to go away. Not because he's necessarily connected to any wrongdoing that Epstein did, but because there are a lot of people high ranking in the government and in other world governments who he has to work with who are implicated, and he knows this. He's aware of who these people are, and he'll release what he wants to release what he can, but he doesn't want to release that much. So it's a big black eye in his face, to be sure. A scandal. That's why it's called the Epstein scandal. I don't think Trump is guilty of any particular wrongdoing with children. And part of the reason I think that isn't because I love the guy, but because I don't want the American president to be that. Any American president. You did a great job. You must get yourself on mainstream media. Great job. Thank you, Desmond. I really appreciate that. And you are a Trumpy, so I appreciate a Trumpy saying that I did a good job. Now, that might mean to the people who are on the left that I'm biased towards Trump, but with other people on the right calling me biased the entire time, yeah. A British conservative would consider a more conservative Democrat, but would certainly be a Democrat. Yeah. So perhaps it's a cultural drift. So if we were proportional, I might be a conservative in Great Britain. I might be Labour. You don't know. But I'm at least able to see both sides of the issue. And Harry, I hope you can understand that. Trump caused it when he tweeted. He said, didn't he say to go peacefully? I don't know how that's causing it. MAGA will do nothing for the U.S. Do you want to know why? Why, Rick? Trump is a, yeah, we know about that. What about pipe bombs? Pancake on the face makes me extra happy. Okay. Thank you, Mr. 10, 100 rubies. Ronald Reagan was a former Democrat. So was Trump. So was Elon Musk. So was Robert F. Kennedy, head of his MAHA, Make America Healthy Again coalition, which Trump built a huge coalition his second time with libertarians kind of buying in, the Bitcoin boys. Then you've got the traditional conservatives. You've got evangelicals, once again, doubling down on their support for him, even if it's contradictory to their own faith. And then you've got the MAHA, the Gillian Anderson, and of course Robert F. Kennedy supporting Trump. It's quite interesting. So yeah, was Hunter the first president's son to leave drugs in the White House? I've heard that accusation. We don't know if Hunter Biden had anything to do with it. If I didn't have anything to hide, I'd show the whole world. That's fair, but what are you hiding? Are you hiding it for your agenda? Why are you hiding it? And then of course it begs the question, why has this been hidden for the last decade almost? But I would make pretty clear that I'm biased. Like, I don't claim to be impartial or claim to be of a fair perspective. If you want to be a good historian, you need to give a fair perspective. I hope you're enjoying the Mojave Territory. That's really cool. What was the Epstein files a big deal when Biden? Why wasn't the Epstein files a big deal when Biden was in office? That's a great question. Why wasn't it? A lot of people were using it then to indict both Republicans and Democrats. If there is nothing to hide, there is nothing to fear. Do you agree or disagree with the statement? Yes. Nobody on January 6th has ever been charged with insurrection. It's a buzzword for Democrats. I don't know if that's fully true. And people have been charged. People were in jail for quite some time. He said he would date his daughter. He said if she wasn't his daughter, he would date her. He said and done disgusting things. I don't think anyone, even his supporters, can defend that. Yes. If you are biased, the problem you have when you are biased and you are analyzing something as a science is that you are looking for confirmation. When you get the confirmation, you stop analyzing it in an objective way. So this is why it's called the social sciences. Yes, Harry doesn't claim to be objective, and I'm not objective, but I'm not going to tell you what I think. There's a difference. I'm going to be as objective as I can in my analysis, and I think I did that. Let's see. Hars is a right-leaning guy. Hars, was I pretty objective? And Harry, was I pretty objective? Let's ask someone on the left. Thoughts on Tim Pool, Destiny Vash? Part of these streamers, really interesting people, don't agree with any of them. Mossad will not allow the truth to be told. Prince Andrew was involved too. Discovered you 5 minutes ago. I don't see a real bias, but we all have biases. Ham, I appreciate that. That's very kind. Would you date your own daughter? No. And yeah, no, of course not. I say vote for Morgan Freeman. He's awesome. Fair point. Here comes Harry with his European rhetoric again. If he were not born in a rich family, he would have been in a job where intelligence is not required. Example, construction or manual labor job at some small factory. Possibly. He also said, fight, fight, fight. He knew the power he had over the mob. It's more of what he didn't say. It took him hours. Yes, that's the disgusting behavior. I agree with that, Ham. He said fight, fight, fight when he got shot. He said fight like hell. I think, I don't even know if he said it. Was Hunter the first president's son? I've already answered that. MAGA is a mismatch to the economic, cultural, and demographic trajectory of the U.S. Could be. Only time will tell, really. Hunter did have something to do with it. He was the one only known druggie. That's all circumstantial. Whose cocaine was in the White House? I don't know. Been hidden because Trump had it the whole time. He hid it in Mar-a-Lago. No. Trump Jew. I love this. Trump is a Zionist Jew. Trump has always supported Israel. The people who are saying this now just listen to Nick Fuentes and think that they're intellectuals. Trump has always supported Israel. He's always been pro-Israel. The people who are complaining about him being pro-Israel now just need something to complain about, even though most of them used to be his supporters, or still are, kind of. I'm a carpenter, and you have to be able to read, understand mathematical formula, building codes, structural engineering, and be intelligent to do construction. Agus is correct. Thank you, Agus. That's a very humbling message for Sam. No one was charged of insurrection, and there were at least 11 people held without being charged. The Republican Party never did that. Illegal aliens? Eddie, don't go down this road. I'd say you were pretty objective with the facts you gave, but you did give at least some thoughts of things about Trump, whether because you forgot or you didn't want to mention those facts. Oh, geez, here comes the disingenuous. What did I forget to mention about the Orange Man? Democrats know they can't win fair elections. That's why they fight voter ID, paper ballots, and proof of citizenship. Name any other reason that makes sense they want to cheat. So that's the nothing to hide argument. Would you shower with your daughter? What? No, of course not. That's disgusting. Is that the Joe Biden whataboutism? I also hate whataboutism. You got to fight when you're being targeted. Was he being targeted, or was he just picking a fight? Who are you actually based on? I like to do your voice and accent. Thank you, Reynard. I'm based on myself. I like the fact that you think I am AI. Harry has made it pretty clear that a lot of his claims are just European rhetoric that shouldn't be taken seriously. Ouch. I would love to see you on Fox News. You have a lot to offer. You must send Fox News your resume. Fox wouldn't want me, because I would be the only one who would interrupt Sean Hannity more than he interrupts me. Hunter was involved in his dad's corruption in Ukraine. Trump kissed the wall. How does that make him a Zionist? I'm not saying Trump is a Zionist. Disingenuous. Oh, geez. MAGA can win elections, but that's not enough. Okay? Illegal aliens are not Americans. What is wrong with you? You're a mouth. Oh, well. I'm saying that holding people without due process. Now, there is due process in immigration courts and stuff like that. But when you look at criminal proceedings, that's another big issue. Can you really deport someone who is pending a charge on a crime that they committed here without at least being convicted of that crime first? That's a big issue. I can understand the people who are held by immigration customs enforcement are actually, at least if they are going to be only deported, are given a hearing at the very least. Or if their hearing is dismissed, that's why they arrest them outside of immigration hearings. If you're not far center, you're racist. Okay then. No, Trump wasn't targeted. He got shot by a sniper by accident. Are you being sarcastic? What do you think about the UK? I love the UK. Someone's actually asking a history question. It's not about Trump. Leave out some facts. It's all right. You left out about the LA riots, the internet significance, TikTok, but you spoke about him objectively. Calm down. Fair enough. But to be fair, I can't talk about all of those things, and most of those things are from his second term. So I almost said nothing about his second term. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. I don't say my name. Yeah, maybe he would. Due process being served, criminals are deported. Fair enough. Here's my opinion. I mean, I get it. Sometimes make two indistinguishable. There's a difference. I think friendly history knows the difference between any opinion stated as fact and the actual fact with my opinion added to it. Not in your case, Harry. Okay. So is Trump on the Epstein files? Yes, he is. And so are so many other people. Fernandez, we don't know what that means, though, because that has been, it used to be that meant that they had done horrible things. Now it means that they might have been involved and known about it, or had gotten dark money, or they were at least associated with Epstein, as Trump was, and that doesn't necessarily mean anything. So when I found out Trump's name was on the Epstein files, I wasn't surprised, and I was one of the people saying, calm down, this means nothing. This was back when I was actually looking at X and other social media reliably, and then I realized that people on there just want to throw red meat, and they don't want to actually listen objectively. Okay, thank you, Desmond, but don't yell your answers. Get rid of the caps lock. Trump is clearly a Zionist by referring to Gaza as the rivers of the Middle East. He wants Palestinian land to be taken away from them and annexed to Israel with U.S. security. He doesn't want that in the West Bank, but he does want that in Gaza. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Spock. Live long and prosper. We don't know if Epstein was part of Mossad. He could have been. Trump was friends with him. I wouldn't say he was best friends. How would you explain Trump's creepy birthday card to Epstein? Very sinister subjects to his jokes. I think we're reading too much into it. If he wrote it, it's just two frat boys being, horny. I read it and I was like, this is kind of innocuous. I don't know if Trump drew it. I don't know. Within MAGA itself, tensions exist. That's true. There are tensions because you got a coalition. When you build a coalition, you're going to get people with different ideas. Is Mossad a collab between the allies? Could be. You think we'll see another RIA group out of Ireland or another UK nation state, or could the IRA return? I don't know. Maybe to get Northern Ireland free, or if Scotland goes the way of that. So, it's funny how so many people are on this Epstein stuff with so many of the leaders they voted for are worse. Very fair. Let me see. Hars, in the European political spectrum or U.S. political spectrum? Okay. Trump learned from Chip Roy Cohn. Interesting. Thank you for joining us from Corsica. Do you think the Jews control the world? No. And I don't. I think they're successful. I think there's a disproportionate amount of success. I think there are cultural factors. Anyways. So Harrison and Harry both think I have. So despite people claiming that I'm a lefty, Harrison and Harry both think I am on the right. It's interesting. And they are my long-term moderators, which means they are wrong. Yeah, you can email me and I will not answer. So I'm not going to share my perspective. I think I do a lot better if people just guess. Was Fred Trump a racist? Probably. There's evidence that he was part of a Klan. He was seen running from a Klan rally. The Rothschilds do not own the world. If you say Northern Ireland should remain part of the UK, they start shooting each other. Yes, that's not bigoted at all for you to say that, Harry. Harry. If I don't ever become a member, would you tell me? No. Give the entirety of Ireland to Iceland. Why don't you give the entirety of Iceland to Ireland? What's your views on Earth's unification? Separate nationalism is an interesting goal. It's fascinating that humans in the last 100 years decided to stop killing each other in such huge numbers and actually decided to start working with each other and build an international community. It's kind of weird. We went from one extreme to another. 2 world wars and the Cold War wasn't enough. Now it's like we all have to work together. It's like overcompensation. Do you believe in God? I do. I don't share which God. I don't share my religious beliefs, Abdul. But salam to you. What is your favorite historical event to study? Personally, I enjoy World War I. The results put us on the road to where we are today. Napoleonic Wars and anything Russian history, Ham. That's where I typically land. Anyways, I went over, 15 minutes over, to answer your questions. Henry, it might very well turn into war. Did a Christian national try to kill Larry Flint? Yes. Are you gay glove guy on OnlyFans, perhaps? Sure. Yeah, Josiah, but don't tell anyone. What do I need to do for you to tell me? Let's meet in person, then we'll talk politics. Meet me in person, and I'll talk politics. And I don't want to meet Harry in person in the UK because I'm worried I won't make it out alive. So he has to come over here. And he has to say one nice thing about Donald Trump, just because it'd be funny. Do right-wing extremists commit more violence? Statistically, yes. What happens is Thomas Crooks was a registered Republican, but he hated Trump, and that's why he tried to kill him. So they say that it's a Republican. The guy who just killed this is a big debate because of a guy who killed Charlie Kirk, who clearly wasn't a right-winger, he was a left-winger. But I don't care about that. I think that's stupid when we try to judge, they're this or that, or they're right or left-wingers doing trying to kill people. I think that you've got harsh political rhetoric. You have a polarized society right now, and people on the fringes who are mentally ill and delusional will buy into it by doing horrible things, like Tyler Robinson, like Thomas Crooks. Should be about Jesus. That'd be an interesting historical live stream lecture. Yes, they do. So does hating one Republican make you not a Republican? No, that's not my point. My point is I don't care about the political backgrounds of somebody. And I don't think that being on the right makes you more likely to be politically violent. Anyways, I'm going to sign off. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Please like and subscribe on your way out. Really good crowd today. Next week, you guys get to vote again on a historical topic. Typically, it's not this political on the channel, but you guys voted and wanted me to talk the history of Donald Trump, and hopefully I did that in as fair a manner as possible. Please take care. Have a great week. We will be back with our live stream Q&As Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, and then Sunday of next week is our live stream lecture. How you guys get to vote maybe on Richard Nixon or something else. We'll see what happens. And check out our long-form videos every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, and our short videos every day here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, dropping all the time. And I hope you all have a really great week. Take care, and remember, as always, love history. Bye-bye.